Imagine a world slowly losing its colors, a vast gray plain under a low, heavy sky, smelling not of frosty freshness, but of damp earth and decay. A small handful of Polynesians roam across this dying land, the final, faint echo of a once mighty tribe. Sticky, wet snow, more like freezing rain, freezes onto their brown coats, while beneath their feet lies viscous, cold slush instead of the familiar solid ground. The great cold, their eternal creator and ally, betrayed them by retreating to the north. There, ancient glaciers crumbled and melted with a roar, their tears giving birth to new, deep rivers that forever reshaped the face of the planet. The mammoths felt only a strange, unsettling thaw, never suspecting that their habitual path was a march into oblivion. The demise of these titans was not a sudden apocalypse. Neither a fiery comet trail nor a global flood wiped them off the face of the earth overnight. Their departure was a long, agonizing struggle, stretched out over millennia and woven from nearly imperceptible changes. A winter that became slightly warmer meant it could rain in January, turning the snowpack into impassable mud. The edge of the ice, having retreated a little further, opened the way for new, unfamiliar plants. Familiar food, encountered slightly less often, forced the herds to walk extra kilometers, draining their strength. Each such little thing was a tiny crack in the monolithic foundation of their world, which, by spreading, ultimately led to its complete collapse. Thus, step by step, the planet bid farewell to some of the most majestic creatures in its long history. We see only the finale of this grand saga, but to grasp the full depth of the loss, one must return to the beginning. Who were these creatures whose name became synonymous with something colossal and irrevocably gone? Today, the mammoth is more of a ghost in our collective imagination, a living museum exhibit, a cartoon character, a shaggy giant wandering through a white blizzard. But behind this monumental, almost mythical image lies a story that is far more complex, grounded, and therefore all the more tragic. For prehistoric man, this giant was not a legend, but the very essence of tangible reality. It was the sound of the earth trembling beneath their feet as the herd approached. It was the scent of dust and fur hanging in the frosty air. Above all, it was a walking promise of life, a mountain of meat capable of feeding a tribe through a long, dark winter, and a source of thick, durable hides that protected them from the icy wind. Its tusks and bones became not just tools and needles, but the frames of the first reliable dwellings. The presence of the mammoth permeated the very fabric of our ancestors' existence, serving not as a symbol of an era, but as its foundation. Look into the eyes of a modern elephant, and you will see a living echo of that world. Mammoths are its close relatives, an evolutionary branch that turned north and was lost in the ice. And although their family was diverse, including steppe giants and dwarf island species, one canonical image is frozen in our memory: the woolly mammoth, the classic titan of the Ice Age, reaching 3 meters at the shoulder and weighing up to 6 tons. It was a living mountain of muscle, bone, and thick reddish-brown fur, topped with a fatty hump on its back, an indomitable symbol of a world we will never be able to see with our own eyes. How did a creature whose distant ancestors knew the heat of the African savanna manage to become the master of the icy wilderness? The answer was literally written into its flesh and blood. The mammoth's body was a living fortress erected against the cold. Beneath the long, coarse hair and thick undercoat lay a layer of fat nearly 10 centimeters deep, an ideal natural thermos that retained internal heat. Even its ears, unlike the huge radiators of its African cousins, were tiny and covered in fur so as not to lose precious degrees. And its incredible curved tusks, which grew up to 4 meters long and weighed 100 kilograms each, served as the primary tool for survival. With them, it not only cleared deep snow in search of dry grass, but also stripped tree bark, defended itself against predators, and asserted its status within the herd. But a mammoth alone was doomed. The true power of the mammoth lay in unity. Their lives were an endless collective journey, with a wise matriarch leading a vast family of daughters, grandchildren, and nephews. She was a living map, carrying in her memory routes spanning hundreds of kilometers, as well as the locations of watering holes and salt licks. This eternal migration was dictated by an insatiable hunger. Tireless herbivores, they moved along invisible paths, digging tough but nutritious grasses and calorie-rich roots out from under the frozen ground. In the harsh realm of the white silence, the only real shelter was the warmth of kin huddled into a tight circle during a blizzard. Their world was an era when life itself reached a titanic scale. Other colossal beings shook the earth alongside the mammoths. Rhinos clad in woolly armor, whose fearsome charge could rival an avalanche, and giant Irish elk, whose incredible antlers looked like the branches of fairy tale trees against the sunset, and in the shadows of rocky ravines hunted those who kept these giants in a state of perpetual tension. Cave lions the size of tigers and lethal saber-toothed cats. It was a brutal yet strikingly balanced and rich ecosystem that pulsed with life beneath the planet's icy mantle. Yet for one inhabitant of this world, the mammoth was something immeasurably more. A new and unique predator appeared on the scene: man. One successful hunt meant tons of meat, enough to feed a tribe for weeks or even months. Part of the haul was smoked over a campfire and dried in the wind, becoming a strategic reserve for times of scarcity. Sturdy hides became the walls of warm shelters, and from the massive bones and tusks, they built entire house frames, carved tools, jewelry, and the first symbols of faith. The dead giant provided the warmth of the hearth and light for those who had managed to overcome it. But its body was only half of its legacy. The other, no less important part, lived on in stone. From the rocky shelters of Iberia to the depths of Siberian caves, prehistoric artists used charcoal and ochre to trace that familiar silhouette with the humped back and curved tusks. In those lines, drawn by the light of a fat-burning lamp, was frozen not just a visual aid for young hunters, but a deep, reverent attitude, mixed with fear and admiration. The mammoth was the central figure of their cosmology, a character in campfire stories, a deity and a sacrifice all at once, whom they desperately tried to understand, appease, and capture for eternity. This entire civilization of giants and their entire ecosystem relied on one single pillar: the cold. Their kingdom was literally forged from ice and permafrost. The endless pastures of the mammoth steppe, rich in nutritious grasses, existed only because the icy breath of the glaciers kept the moisture-loving forests far to the south. The mammoth was the absolute monarch of this world, but its throne stood on a foundation of frozen water, and in this total, absolute dependence on stable conditions lay their fatal vulnerability. They were the perfect creation of their era, but completely unprepared for the fact that every era eventually comes to an end. To understand the empire they were losing, one must see the planet at the peak of the glaciation. Billions of tons of water were locked away in giant ice sheets, and sea levels plummeted by more than 100 meters. The seabed was exposed, turning into land and connecting continents with land bridges. It was here, across a vast expanse from Spain to Chukotka and beyond into North America, that their kingdom stretched. A single, unified pasture of dry, wind-swept meadows. A vast world, born of the cold and destined to disappear along with it. The point of no return was passed about 12,000 years ago. The planet's global thermostat shifted by only a few degrees, but it triggered an irreversible chain reaction. The giant glaciers of Europe and America began to melt rapidly, and the released water surged into the oceans. The sea advanced, swallowing coastal plains and severing migration routes. But the main blow was dealt to the very heart of the mammoth world. The hard, frozen ground, covered in nutritious steppe vegetation, was replaced by boggy, impassable wetlands and thick, humid forests. Their home was drowning and being overgrown by alien vegetation right before their eyes. This might seem like a paradox. How can a world blossoming with such vibrant new life bring death? Yet, that is exactly what happened. The dry, nutrient-rich carpet of the mammoth steppe gave way to mosses, lichens, and coniferous forests. The planet was throwing a feast of greenery, but the giants were not invited. Their digestive systems, perfectly adapted to processing the tough, fiber-rich steppe grass, could not handle a new diet of twigs and pine needles. To them, this new abundance meant starvation. The incredible specialization that had been their greatest survival tool turned into a death sentence in a changing world. A world that was once harsh but predictable began to drift and shift. Ancient migration routes, etched into the memories of matriarchs, were interrupted by sudden rivers and sticky bogs, where the giants would get bogged down under their own weight. Their vast empire broke apart into isolated islands of suitable pasture, where the remnants of herds had to fight for every blade of grass against more agile bison and horses. Simultaneously, the melting permafrost unleashed invisible armies, ancient parasites and microbes to which the mammoths had no immunity. Longer, humid summers gave rise to countless swarms of blood-sucking insects that spread disease and drove the animals to exhaustion. It was a blow against which neither tusks nor thick hide could provide protection. And into this slow-motion drama stepped the most unpredictable and active player of all. While the mammoth world was falling apart at the seams, the human world was flourishing. Human intelligence was becoming sharper. Their social organization was becoming more complex, and their weapons more lethal. Light javelins, launched with the help of an atlatl, a lever that multiplied the force of the throw, struck their targets with deadly power from a safe distance. Hunting shifted from a risky face-to-face struggle to a coordinated and efficient industry. Now, weakened by hunger, disease, and fragmentation, the herds faced a threat that knew how to think strategically, cooperate, and patiently wait for the right moment. Tribes learned to turn the world itself into their ally, and the very nature of the mammoth into a weapon against it. Their main target was not the animal itself, but its instinctual fear. Expertly provoked panic, stirred by fire and shouting, sent the herd into a blind frenzy, an uncontrollable force of nature. And suddenly, these colossi, maddened by terror, would stampede toward a camouflaged cliff or get stuck in a bog, where their own power and mass became a fatal trap. They fell into a snare created from their own predictable behavior and the strength of their social bonds. The fate of the last giants was sealed by a perfect storm that converged at a single point in time and space. On one hand, the climate was changing, slowly but inexorably, taking away their home and food, destroying their world from within. On the other hand, across the remaining scraps of suitable land, humans acted with increasing confidence, their hunting pressure growing with every new generation. It was a war on two fronts that could not be won. Each vanished herd was not just a statistical loss, it was an ancient bloodline coming to an end. One more step into the abyss. As if a dark double, following the human who conquered the planet, the shadow of extinction trailed behind, ultimately leaving mankind in frightening solitude at the top of a world that had become much poorer.